3.1 Graph of functions. In this section, we are going to learn how to graph the function by plotting points, use the vertical line test, determine the function value graphically, determine the domain and the range of a function from its graph, recognize the graph of common functions. Let's get started. Graph the function by plotting the point. The graph of a function f in the xy planes is the set of all points x, y, where x is in the domain of x, y is in the range of the function f, and y is equal f of x. So these two, they are the same meaning. That means a function. Graph the functions. The first function is -2 with absolute value, so we call this as an absolute value function. B is a square root function because it has a square root sign. So the first thing you should know is the absolute value function, it will have the V shape. It could be facing up V or facing down V, depends on the sign in front of your absolute value. So this negative sign gives us that information. It will have the down V shape. So if I graph the function by using the plot point, sorry. So I'm going to create an XY table here. And I always start from the 0 because that's an easier number to generate. So I pick the 0, I pick the 1, pick the 2, go down, pick the -1, -2. I always use this 5 number to insert under the X table. Now, we need to substitute this 5 number into the function, back into the function y, which is f of x. So the f of x is -2 with absolute value x plus 3. So when I plug in the 2 into here, it's 2. So 2 multiply -2, you get -4. -4 plus 3, you'll get a -1. Plugging 1 into here, you'll get a -2 plus 3 is 1. Plugging 0, you'll get a 3. Plugging -1 into here, when the x, let me write down here, plus 3. So the -1 with absolute value, it turns to +1, multiply -2 plus 3 is 1. When I have the -2 plug in here, remove the bar, it turns to a +2, multiply with -2 is -4, plus 3 is -1. So now we can simply just plot these 5 pair of the point into the x and y plane, and we can sketch the graph. So I have 2 and a -1, 1, 1, 0, 3, -1, 1, -2, -1. So combine all the dot here, I can sketch the graph. At this point should be a little bit toward to the right here. It's not very accurate. But this is the idea, sketching the graph by plotting the point. And we are going to learn finding the vertex point to sketch the graph. I think that's a wiser way to do it. Okay. So now we try the B. B is a square root function. Let me change your color. When you have the square root function, you should know the graph, you will have the curve like this. I always call a Nike curve. So when you have a positive square root function, your curve will is going up curve toward you forever. When you have the negative square root function, the curve will going down. Now we need to find the number on the domain, which is the beginning point. So the way you can find the beginning point, with your radical function, we always set whatever you have under the radical greater equal than 0. And from here, you solve for x. That means x must be greater equal than 2. Then your radical function will continue forever. So this will be the most left-hand side point of your function. So we write down the 2. And then you can pick the number bigger than 2 toward to the right-hand side. So I'm going to pick the 3, 4. 3 numbers should be sufficient to sketch the graph. So now we substitute the x equal 2 back to the function, you'll get a y is equal to 0. Substitute the 3 back to the function, you will get a 1. Substitute 4 back to the function, you will get a root 2. Now we can sketch the graph. Let me do the graph here. So the first pair of points is 2, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2, 0. 3, 1. 4, root 2. Root 2 is about approximately equal 1.14. So it's a little bit higher than 1. Now combine these 3 dots, I can sketch the graph. So this would be square root x minus 2 of the function. Alright. Use the vertical line test to identify the function. Determine whether the graph is a function or not. We go with a vertical line test. So if every vertical line that can be drawn intersect the graph into no more than 1 point, then the graph represents a function. So if the vertical line passing through the graph, for example, if I have the graph with this direction, so when I go with the vertical line test, it passing through the graph or it intersect with the graph 2 points at a time, then in that case, this graph is not a function. So if we look at example, the first graph, vertical line test, has 2 points. So this is not a function. This function, yes, it only passing through 1 point at a time. This curve, this graph, it passing through 1 point at a time, so it's not a function. So the vertical line will help us to determine whether the graph is a function or not, as long as the vertical line passing through the graph 1 point at a time. Determine the function value graphically. So we look at the example. This is a graph of the function. I have no idea what type of function it is. So if they ask you to find the f of -3, this -3 is the value on the x-axis, so which is the input. So this question is asking you to find when x equals -3, what is the y value? So you just simply to go find the x equals -3, -3 is here. And then you look at the y value. So the y value, when you look at the y value here is 0. So when x equals -3, y is equal to 0. Finding the x equals 1. So x equals 1 is here. Now you go down to find the y value. This is the y value, right? Because when x equals 1, this is a y value. So y value is -1. In other words, when the question gives you the x value, you draw the horizontal line to hit the y-axis, and that's the way you can find the y value. So when x equals -3, this is a point, right? And then you draw the horizontal line to hit the y-axis. So that will be the y value. When they give you the x equals 1, x equals 1 is here. You go down to find that point and look at your y-axis. so it's a -1. Find the value of x, f of x equals 17. The c, they give you the y value. Now you need to go back to find the x value. So finding the y value at 17, 17 is here. In the graph, when y equals 17, that point is right here. But you need to find the x value, so you need to go down to find the x value. So when x equals 3, y is 17.